Homeowner Association just sent me a letter demanding that I get rid of my dog, claiming he is aggressive and dangerous. I stared at the paper in disbelief, my hands tightening around the edges of the letter. Roki, my German Shepherd, had never harmed anyone. Sure, he barked when strangers got too close to the fence, but that was normal, right? That was what dogs did. Yet here I was, being accused of harboring a threat to the neighborhood. I knew exactly where this was coming from. Karen Lawrence. The woman had been a thorn in my side since the day I moved in 6 months ago. She had complained about everything. My grass was too high, my garbage cans weren't aligned properly, my porch light was too bright. And now, apparently, my dog was a menace. I could already see her smug face, pretending to be terrified of my sweet, well-trained dog just to have another excuse to control the neighborhood. Roki sat beside me, his ears perked up as he watched me crumple the letter. He was an intelligent dog, always sensing when something was wrong. I scratched behind his ear, my mind racing. There was no way I was getting rid of him. Absolutely not. Rachel, my 16-year-old daughter, stormed into the living room, her eyes flashing with anger as she snatched the letter from my hand. They can't do this. Roki isn't aggressive. He wouldn't hurt a fly. Her voice shook, but I could tell it wasn't from fear. It was from rage. I sighed, rubbing my temple. I know, but you also know how this place works. Karen has the Homeowner Association wrapped around her finger. If she wants something, she finds a way to get it. Rachel threw the letter onto the coffee table, crossing her arms. We should fight this. We have videos of Roki playing with kids, sitting calmly on the porch. We can prove he's not dangerous. I nodded, but deep down I knew it wouldn't be that easy. This wasn't about proof. This was about power. The next morning, I found an official notice taped to my front door. Final warning. Failure to comply with Homeowner Association regulations will result in daily fines and legal action. My stomach twisted. They weren't wasting any time. This was their way of breaking people down. Financial pressure, legal threats. It was all a game to them. I checked the security camera footage from last night, scrolling through the timeline. Around midnight, a shadow moved near my fence. Someone had been there, lurking. My pulse quickened. Karen? A Homeowner Association member? I rewound the footage and hit pause. There, right in front of the gate, was a small bag. I stepped outside, heart pounding, and found it resting on my porch. Inside was a single note. Get rid of the dog before it's too late. Anger burned in my chest. This wasn't just about complaints anymore. This was intimidation. Rachel found me staring at the note, her face darkening as she read it. This is insane. Are they really this desperate? She clenched her fists. Dad, we have to do something. I exhaled sharply. We will, but we have to be smart about it. We need evidence, witnesses. If they're playing dirty, we'll have to be ready. The following day, I walked into the Homeowner Association office, Roki's leash firmly in my grip. The receptionist gave me a wary look but didn't stop me as I strode into the meeting room where Karen and 2 other board members were sitting. Karen's eyes widened as she saw Roki. You can't bring that thing in here. He's a registered service dog, I said calmly, which was a lie, but I didn't care. I want to discuss these baseless accusations against my dog. One of the board members, an older man named Mark Reed, cleared his throat. Mr. Bale, we have received multiple complaints about your dog's aggressive behavior. Residents have expressed fear for their safety. I folded my arms. Which residents? The ones who pet him when I walk by? The ones who laugh when he plays fetch in the park? Or just Karen? Karen's face turned red. I was attacked. That animal lunged at me. I stepped forward. Funny, because I have security footage from that exact time. And guess what? Roki was inside my house. Silence. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Mark glanced at her before shifting uncomfortably in his chair. We'll have to review the footage. I dropped a flash drive onto the table. Go ahead, take your time, but in the meantime, stop harassing me and my daughter. Because if this continues, I'll make sure the entire neighborhood knows how you fabricate violations to get your way." Karen glared at me, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I walked out of the Homeowner Association office feeling a mixture of triumph and unease. Karen had been caught in her lie, but I knew that wouldn't be enough to stop her. She and the rest of the board had too much power, too much control over the neighborhood, and if they wanted to keep pushing, they would. This was only the beginning. When I got home, Rachel was pacing the living room, her arms crossed. Roki sat attentively beside her, his ears twitching at every movement. She turned as soon as I stepped inside, her eyes searching my face. "Well," she asked, her voice tense. I tossed my keys onto the table and exhaled. "They said they'd review the footage." Rachel scoffed. "That's it? You proved Karen was lying and all they said was they'd review the footage? That's ridiculous." "It's their way of buying time," I muttered, rubbing a hand down my face. "They're not going to back down that easily. We need to be prepared for whatever comes next." Rachel clenched her jaw. "So what do we do now? Just wait for them to come up with another excuse?" "No," I said, sitting on the couch and patting the cushion next to me. "We get ahead of them. If they try something again, we need to have proof that they're targeting us unfairly." Rachel sat down with a sigh, her fingers absently scratching behind Roki's ears. "You think they'll try something else?" I nodded. "Absolutely. Karen won't let this go, and neither will the board. If she's lied once, she'll lie again." That night, I installed 2 more security cameras, one facing the backyard and another angled toward the front walkway. If anyone tried to mess with us again, I'd have it all recorded. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of loud knocking. My stomach twisted as I threw on a shirt and hurried to the door. Standing there was a police officer, looking down at a notepad, and beside him, arms crossed and smug as ever, was Karen. "Mr. Bale," the officer asked, "we received a report about an aggressive dog on your property." I clenched my teeth, already knowing where this was going. "You mean the same dog that was accused of attacking someone who was proven to be lying?" Karen gasped dramatically. "Are you accusing me of lying to an officer?" she asked, pressing a hand to her chest. "I'm accusing you of having a vendetta against me and my dog," I shot back, "and you're trying to use the police to do your dirty work." The officer sighed. "We still have to investigate the report. Is the dog on the premises?" I gestured to the yard, where Roki sat obediently behind the fence, his tail wagging slightly as he watched us. "There's your dangerous dog." The officer studied him for a moment, flipping through his notepad. "Do you have any video footage of last night? Any evidence that might help clarify the situation?" I exhaled, relieved that at least this cop was willing to listen. "Yeah, actually I do. Give me a second." I went inside, pulled up the security footage on my laptop, and brought it back out. I played the clip from the night before. Karen standing by the fence, throwing something toward Roki before quickly stepping back and looking around. The officer frowned as he watched, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, can you explain this?" Karen's face turned a deep shade of red. "I was just walking by. I didn't do anything wrong." The officer sighed. "Mr. Bale, it looks like there's nothing to support the claim that your dog is aggressive. I'm going to file this as an unfounded complaint." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're making a mistake. That dog is dangerous." The officer tucked his notepad away. "What I see is a dog sitting calmly behind a fence while you try to provoke him. If there are any more false reports, we'll be having a different conversation." Karen stormed off without another word. The officer gave me a nod before heading back to his car. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Rachel ran outside, having watched everything from the window. "Dad, this is insane. She's not going to stop." I looked down at Roki, who leaned into my side, sensing my tension. "I know. That's why we have to be smarter." That night, another note appeared on my porch. No envelope, no signature. Just 6 words scrawled in sharp, angry handwriting. "You won't win. Get rid of it." I clenched the paper, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. This wasn't over. Not even close. The note in my hands felt heavier than it should have. 6 words, hastily scrawled but carrying a threat that was impossible to ignore. You won't win. Get rid of it. My mind raced, considering every possible implication. This wasn't just about Karen anymore. Someone else in the neighborhood was willing to escalate this conflict beyond complaints and fines. Someone wanted Roki gone at any cost. Rachel stepped out onto the porch, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warmth of the evening air. She stared at the note, then at me, waiting for my reaction. I folded the paper and stuffed it into my pocket, forcing a calm I didn't feel. We keep going. We don't back down. Her jaw clenched, but she nodded. What if they do something worse? What if... They won't, I interrupted, though I wasn't sure I believed it. We're not alone in this. But that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling crawling under my skin. The security cameras had caught Karen trying to provoke Roki, but what if next time it wasn't something as harmless as a thrown object? What if next time they tried something else? Poison? A forced removal order from the Homeowner Association? I wasn't just fighting Karen's lies anymore. I was fighting an entire system designed to wear people down until they either gave up or left. The next morning, I found fresh tire tracks near the side of my house. Someone had pulled up close to the fence overnight. I checked the security footage and saw a car idling there for a few minutes before speeding off. The plates were unreadable, but the message was clear. Intimidation. Rachel was furious. We have to go to the police. This is beyond harassment now. I considered it. But what would I tell them? That an anonymous note and an unidentified car were proof of a conspiracy? That Karen and the Homeowner Association were waging psychological warfare against me? The police had already dismissed her complaint about Roki as a false report. They might take this seriously, or they might shrug it off as neighborhood drama. Still, I wasn't going to sit around and wait for their next move. I spent the afternoon reinforcing the backyard gate, installing an extra lock, and setting up additional cameras. If they were going to try something again, I wanted every possible angle covered. That evening, just as I was finishing up, a knock sounded at the door. I tensed, half expecting another officer or worse, Karen herself. But when I opened it, I found Mark Reed, the head of the Homeowner Association, standing there with his hands in his pockets. He offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Bale, I thought we should have a civil conversation." I stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind me. "A civil conversation? About what?" "Your dog," he said simply. "You need to understand that this neighborhood has rules for a reason. We can't have an animal causing fear among residents." I folded my arms. "You mean Karen?" Mark tilted his head. "Karen isn't the only one concerned. I've had multiple complaints filed. People don't feel safe. And yet none of those people have spoken to me directly," I pointed out. "None of them seem to have any issue when I walk Roki through the neighborhood. Funny, isn't it?" His smile faltered slightly. "Look, Mr. Bale, I don't want this to turn into a bigger issue than it already is. If you cooperate, we can avoid unnecessary conflict." "Cooperate?" I repeated, my temper flaring. "You mean give up my dog? The dog that has done nothing wrong? The dog that your own security footage cleared?" Mark sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Be reasonable. The Homeowner Association has authority here. You can fight us, but the outcome won't be in your favor. The fines will increase. The legal pressure will intensify. Are you prepared for that?" I met his gaze. "Are you? Because I have no problem taking this to court." His expression darkened. "I was hoping we could avoid that." "So was I admitted. "But I'm not going to roll over just because you and Karen don't like my dog." Mark studied me for a moment, then sighed again. "All right, but don't say I didn't warn you." He left without another word, but I knew this wasn't over. If anything, it was only getting started. That night, around 2 a.m, Roki's deep, warning bark jolted me awake. I grabbed a flashlight and rushed to the back door, my pulse pounding. As I stepped onto the porch, I saw movement near the fence. 2 figures, barely visible in the dark. They froze as my light hit them, then bolted toward a waiting car. The engine roared and they sped off before I could get a good look at them. I ran to check the gate. The lock had been tampered with, partially cut. They had been trying to get in, trying to get to Roki. Rachel came running out, her face pale. "Dad, what's happening?" I turned to her, my jaw tightening. "We just got our proof. They're not going to stop." The next morning, I sent the footage to my lawyer. If the Homeowner Association wanted a war, they were going to get one. The footage of the attempted break-in was undeniable proof that this had escalated far beyond neighborhood politics. Someone was trying to get into my yard, and there was no question about their target. Roki. Whether they planned to harm him, take him, or set him up, I didn't know. But I was done playing defense. Rachel sat at the kitchen table the next morning, arms crossed, her face pale with exhaustion. Neither of us had gotten much sleep after what happened. Roki had been on edge too, pacing near the door, growling every time he heard a car pass by. It was as if he knew just how much danger he was in. I set down my coffee and looked at my daughter. "We're going to the police. This isn't just harassment anymore. This is criminal." She nodded, but didn't say anything. I could see the fear in her eyes. For all her anger, for all her defiance, the reality of the situation was hitting her hard. Someone had come to our home in the middle of the night, and if I hadn't woken up, if Roki hadn't barked, I didn't want to finish the thought. At the station, I showed the footage to an officer named Detective Harris. He was middle-aged with a sharp gaze that lingered on the video a little longer than I expected. When the clip ended, he sat back, rubbing his chin. "You said you've had trouble with the Homeowner Association before this?" "Yeah. They've been trying to get rid of my dog for weeks. First it was fines, then complaints. Then Karen Lawrence claimed he attacked her, even though we had proof she was lying. Now this." Harris exhaled. "It's enough to open an investigation, but I'll be honest with you. Without a clear ID on the suspects, it's going to be hard to make arrests. Homeowner associations can be persistent, especially when they think they're untouchable." "So what do we do?" Rachel asked. "Just wait until they try again?" "No," I said, my voice firm. "We don't wait. We push back." Harris looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll send a patrol car through your neighborhood a few times a night. Maybe that'll scare them off. In the meantime, keep your cameras rolling. And if you see anything suspicious, don't hesitate to call." That wasn't enough, but it was something. I needed more. When we got home, I made a few phone calls. One to my lawyer, one to a local news station, and one to a private investigator I'd found online. If the Homeowner Association wanted a war, I was going to make it public. That night, Roki was restless again. Every noise outside made his ears twitch. I sat up with him watching the security feeds on my laptop, waiting. Nothing happened. But that didn't mean it was over. The next morning I found a new letter taped to my door. "You're making a mistake. Drop it before it gets worse." Rachel clenched her fists when she read it. "This is insane. They're threatening us. They're not even trying to hide it anymore." I folded the letter and put it in an envelope. Let's see what the police have to say about this. But when I got to the station, Harris was out. The officer at the front desk took my statement with a bored expression and promised to make a note of it. I could feel it already. Nothing was going to happen. They were going to brush this off as a neighborhood dispute, just like they always did. That evening, I got a call from the private investigator. His name was Maxwell Trent, and his voice was rough and matter-of-fact. "I've been looking into your Homeowner Association. You're not the first person they've pulled this kind of stunt on, but you might be the first one to fight back this hard." "What do you mean?" "I mean, there are records of other families who were pushed out, people who got fined into the ground, others who had mysterious damage to their homes until they gave up and left. This isn't just about a dog, it's about control, and if they see you standing up to them, they're going to hit harder." I swallowed. "So what do we do?" Maxwell chuckled. "You already started the right way, getting the media involved, but we need to dig deeper, find out who's really pulling the strings. You willing to go that far?" I glanced at Rachel, who was sitting on the floor with Roki, hugging him tightly. I didn't have a choice. "Yeah, I'm in." That night, I doubled the security measures around the house. More locks, more cameras, motion sensor lights in every corner of the yard. If they wanted to come back, they'd have to do it in full view. But the next attack didn't come at my house, it came at my job. The next morning, I walked into work to find my boss waiting for me at my desk, arms crossed. "Andrew, we need to talk." I frowned. "What's going on?" He handed me a folder. "We got an anonymous complaint. Someone sent an email saying you've been unstable lately, that you've been making threats. It's serious enough that HR has to investigate." My stomach turned. "That's a lie. Who?" "I don't know," he cut in. "But I do know that this is the kind of thing that can't be ignored. Take a few days off. Let this blow over." I sat down hard, gripping the folder. This was their next move. If they couldn't break me at home, they were going to try to break me financially. Rachel called as soon as I got home. "Dad, you need to see this." I pulled up my laptop. The news station I'd contacted had finally run the story. Local man claims Homeowner Association targeting his family over dog dispute. My name was in the headline. My address was in the body of the article. The Homeowner Association's response? A vague statement about upholding community standards and ensuring safety. I exhaled slowly. They just put a target on my back. Rachel looked at me, her expression unreadable. Then, we better make sure we hit back harder. The next morning, my lawyer called. "Andrew, you're not going to believe what I found." I gripped the phone tighter, my pulse quickening. "What did you find?" My lawyer, Alan Carter, hesitated for a moment before responding. "You were right about this not being just about your dog. I went through the Homeowner Association's financial records, what I could access legally, and I found some very questionable transactions. Large amounts of money being funneled into private accounts, unexplained fees being charged to homeowners, legal disputes that magically vanished without a trace. The way I see it, this isn't just about Karen or Mark Reed wanting you gone. It's about something much bigger." I exhaled sharply. "Corruption." "Exactly. And I think you've been getting too close. That's why they've been escalating their attacks. If you push this further, they'll come at you with everything they've got. You need to be ready." Rachel was listening from the doorway. She crossed her arms. "We're not backing down, are we?" I met her gaze. "No, we're not." That night, I barely slept. Every shadow outside seemed like a potential threat. Roki stayed close, his ears twitching at every sound. The weight of what I had uncovered pressed heavily on me. If Alan was right, this wasn't just a petty vendetta anymore. This was a battle against something much deeper and more dangerous. The next morning, I sent the financial documents to the news station that had covered my story. If they were willing to expose this, maybe I stood a chance. But I knew better than to rely on the media alone. I needed more. I needed proof that couldn't be ignored. Maxwell Trent, the private investigator, called me later that afternoon. "I think I've got something. Meet me at the diner on 8th Street in an hour." I arrived early, scanning the parking lot for anything suspicious. When Maxwell finally slid into the booth across from me, he looked more serious than usual. He pulled out a small flash drive and set it on the table. Surveillance footage from 3 years ago. The Homeowner Association strong-arming an elderly couple into selling their home. They were threatened, harassed, just like you. They refused. A week later, their house mysteriously caught fire. No one was ever charged. My stomach turned. Jesus. And that's just the start. I've got files showing how they've been using false fines and legal loopholes to push people out. If you're willing to take this to court, this could blow the whole thing open. I stared at the flash drive, feeling the weight of it. "What happens if I do this?" Maxwell smirked. "You bring the whole damn house down." The decision wasn't difficult. I took the drive and left, heading straight to Alan's office. We spent hours going through the files, piecing together a case strong enough to take to the authorities. Alan's confidence grew with every document we reviewed. "This is enough," he finally said. "They won't be able to bury this." That night, I received another note. This time, it wasn't subtle. Last warning. Stop or pay the price. Rachel held the note with trembling hands. "Dad, what if they actually do something this time?" I pulled her into a hug. "We're going to finish this. No matter what." The next morning, everything exploded. The news station ran the story, exposing the Homeowner Association's corruption in full detail. Within hours, social media was flooded with outrage. Other homeowners came forward with their own horror stories. The local government announced an official investigation. Then, the real blow came. Karen was arrested. Mark Reed resigned. The entire Homeowner Association board was under scrutiny. Rachel and I watched the news together, Roki lying at our feet. She turned to me, a small smile playing on her lips. We won. I let out a breath I'd been holding for weeks. Yeah, we did. It wasn't perfect. The damage had been done. But for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Roki was safe. Our home was ours again. And the people who tried to take it all away? They were finally getting what they deserved.